Have you ever wondered how brands measure their television commercials? And I'm not talking about Nielsen ratings or number of impressions or people viewing their ads. I'm talking about return on ad spend. How many concrete dollars are my television commercials generating from my bottom line so I can compare it with other marketing channels? Look no further. Here's the 15 ways that brands do it. And I've personally have used and exercised all but two of the methods that are on this list and at enormous scale. So I'm the former head of television data science at TripAdvisor, where we were spending over $100 million per year across the globe, 10 countries. And my team was specifically responsible for measuring each one of those dollars and optimizing television so that we generate more revenue per dollar invested into the channel. Unfortunately, I could tell you that most of these methods, even though they're commonly used, do not work in practice. Only a few of them actually have utility, and even those, it takes a lot of hand-holding, massaging, and understanding the limitations of this under the scenes to get them to work well. But the good news is that when you do have them working well, multiple methods on this list will give you roughly the same result and corroborate each other, even though they're using very different methods. I find that television requires some of my top data scientists relative to other marketing channels. In fact, compared to my days in quant finance doing portfolio risk analysis for equities, television attribution is more difficult. You might be wondering, well, Tim, why is it so difficult? And why do we have 15 methods to measure television? Why not one? And it all boils down to the view-through effect of television. The fact that almost all of television's value is going to be coming in through other channels, and there's going to be a time delay between when you show the ad and when that value is coming in through the other channels. That combination of time and sideways view-through traffic is where the complexity comes in. And this also leads to bigger questions for the organization, because given that most, if not all, of television value is coming in through other channels, think of the impact it's going to have on other channels. Many brands are not prepared for their SEM costs to go up when they start running television campaigns, which commonly happens if you're doing SEM correctly. If you're doing SEM correctly, you should be bidding on your brand keywords. And one of the common modes for folks to respond to a TV ad is to take out their phone, do a search of your brand name, not the vanity URL or something you have on your ad, but doing a search for your brand name sideways through search, and then coming and clicking on the first thing that they see, which is usually the SEM ad, if not that, the SEO link. And so, in fact, Videoquant, we're saving brands millions of dollars and boosting the impact of TV by about 4x by taking advantage of this unique attribute of television to generate all of its value sideways. It turns out that there's a lot of interesting things you could do with that very unique halo effect. But it makes the measurement complicated. It also leads to brands doing massive double counting, particularly if you're marketing, if you have independent marketing teams that are, say, running online marketing channels that are separate from offline. Given all of television's impact is coming in through one of the other channels, it means that you're going to likely lead to double counting on their bottom lines of the value from TV. So you have to unwind that in order to understand how it's all working together. And very rarely do brands put enough cycles behind doing that. That being said, let's go into the set of 15 methods. I want to tell you a little bit about each one of the methods, as well as some of the limitations and things to look out for so you're aware. And that's what's important to me, is making sure folks are at least knowledgeable and aware of some of the limitations if they do decide to use some of these methods. So I've split it up into macro methods and micro methods. Macro, those are top-down methods, generally done over time. There's a time level granularity. Micro methods are bottom-up. Usually the way to think about it is micro methods, we're trying to measure individual people responding to the ad, whereas macro is not individual people. That's how I differentiate between the two. These are in no particular order. So let's start out with vanity URLs. What are they? So this is www.mycompany.com/TV or TV10. It's a unique URL that you design for the television campaign or for individual television assets. And you're hoping and praying as a brand that someone who responds to my TV ad is going to use that vanity URL/TV when they come to my site. Unfortunately, it just doesn't really work well in practice. In fact, once coupon sites, discount sites start picking up that vanity URL, a large percentage of the traffic you see coming in on them are just completely unassociated with TV. So you can't even figure out how to scale. We already know a priori that only a subset of people are going to be using them, if at all. But very quickly, that subset may not even have anything to do with television. So for that reason, really difficult to get them to work in practice. QR codes are a slight cousin, slightly different set of problems. So you put that visual QR code onto the ad unit itself in hopes that someone will take out their smartphone, take a picture, and then come directly to your site. The challenge here is that it's a very biased subset of folks that are actually going to be responding on those QR codes. And so the utility of using that as a proxy measurement for the total impact of TV just it really doesn't, I've never seen it work well in practice. Promo codes. So this is where you come up with a unique discount code that you put on the television campaign or on the specific creative asset. And you're hoping that people will remember that promo code that's unique to TV when they come in and engage with your site and eventually engage in some type of a conversion event. To some extent, it's even worse than vanity URLs, not just because of the discount coupon sites picking them up, but also because it's kind of falling into the area that television works least good at, which is that kind of quick response. With television, because there's this delay, you're needing people to remember that promo code for an even longer period of time versus a vanity URL where at least if they came direct on it, hey, they're associated with that TV ad. With promo codes, you're expecting them to remember at some future point in time when they come back to your site or come to your site for the first time and then go through your funnel, remember to enter in that code. So for that reason, it doesn't really work that great. I'm going to get back to smart TVs in just a second. That's a really cool subject, and I want to spend more time on that. I'll get back to that. Smartphone surveillance, otherwise known as audio beacons. So this is where you put a unique audio identifier onto the creative unit, onto the TV commercial itself. There are then a bunch of apps on your cell phone that are using your microphone to listen in. Your cell phone could hear this unique audio signature that is outside of the human ear spectrum, so you can't hear it, but the cell phone can. Then sends that information to a central repository along with the identifier for your device, your household. And that allows for much cleaner down the funnel attribution because now you have the same device that both heard the ad, and in many cases, the person responds on that same device going to your website. And it could even be offset in time by months. So works cool, but very creepy from a privacy standpoint. So for that reason, I think twice before using it. And it's kind of one of those hush-hush areas, taboo areas within the field of television measurement. Post-spot lift analysis, also known as spike analysis. Any media agency worth their salt is going to be doing some form of this. So what it involves is taking the logs of each individual television airing that you're entitled to. They're called the post logs. So when you purchase TV, you need to get record of each airing, the network it ran on, and the timestamp. You're then going to join that data keyed on time to your site traffic logs. So agencies will media agencies, many of them will do it for you. You could do it yourself in-house. And what you're going to be looking for is spikes in traffic or changes to what's happening on your site in the time immediately following each individual airing. Now, usually what you'll see in practice is you won't see lift for any one airing unless you're talking about a really massive spot, such as a Super Bowl ad, or if your baseline of traffic is really small. So say if you're a startup or small company, then you might see lift on individual spots. Usually you have to aggregate hundreds, if not thousands of spots together in order to see this by exponential lift curve that appears. It's really fun to see it working in practice. It has a lot of issues. It's so technically difficult to get working. And then it's only measuring a small subset, a biased subset of the total value of your TV ads. That being said, there's some cool tricks you could do with this, and there is utility to the method. In fact, you can get it to correlate strongly with other methods such as smart TV. So it is something that we do use in practice. Pre-conversion surveys. So this is where you pop a survey on your website asking people what led them to your website, television being one of the options on the list. And a close cousin to that is the post-conversion survey. Instead of popping it when they land on the site, you pop the survey after they convert on the site, or you send them an email after conversion with the same survey. These do have utility. In fact, they're useful in assessing that tail effect of television, the time latency of TV. But they're very sensitive to the phrasing, the wording, and they also create a lot of site friction. And so there is a very specific way to word the surveys and a very specific place to put these surveys in order to get the best data from them. They do have utility though. You then have traditional Nielsen panels. So this is a panel of about 40 to 60,000 people per year. One of my family members is on one of the panels. And basically, these individuals sign up to keep a journal of what they're watching, and they also have a device from Nielsen that's listening into what they're watching. And this allows Nielsen to estimate from this sample of people how many total people likely were watching the ad or sugar ad plus or minus a certain range. And then you have cable set-top box data. So these are the cable boxes that they're keeping track of what's getting watched. and they're associated with your household. And so you could kind of connect the dots that way to measure television. All right, let's go back to smart TV ACR, automatic content recognition data. This today, in my opinion, personally, is the best source of data for television measurement and attribution. So the way it works is when you purchase a smart television, think Vizio, think LG, many brands, and you plug it into wall for the first time after taking it out of the box, it's going to ask you a bunch of questions as part of the setup process. Buried in there somewhere in the middle is going to be a question: do you agree to share data with the manufacturer or some subsidiary? And by the time you get to this part of that process, the setup process, you just want to watch the TV. So you're just clicking yes to everything. Just get me through it. When you agree to share that data, what's happening behind the scenes is that hardware, that physical TV, is keeping track of the content that's getting shown or the sounds that are coming through it. It doesn't know what that content is, but it's keeping track of what I call the fingerprint of whatever is getting shown. Can't identify that this is an ad for company XYZ, but it has a fingerprint, just like if you were to see a person's fingerprint on a cup. We can't identify the person, but we see, hey, it's a fingerprint we haven't seen before. You then have companies such as iSpot, TV Squared, Samba, that will build up ad catalogs that have fingerprints associated with known ads that could have run. And then by connecting the dots between the ACR data and this ad catalog of known ads, you can now say, all right, it's this ad, this commercial that showed on this device associated with this household, this IP address. And then when we join that with the site traffic for the site, again, that's done by these vendors such as iSpot, TV Squared, Samba, you now have a somewhat direct down the funnel attribution where we have a device associated with that household. We know that this particular ad was shown to that household, and then we can see and connect the dots that, hey, this person was responding to that ad. There's a lot of things that could go wrong here. It's a little more complicated, in fact, versus the audio beacon, because there's that extra join step of you have to build up the ad catalog and join it to the fingerprint versus an audio beacon where you don't need that fingerprint and join process. The audio beacon is unique to that ad. So it's more complicated to do, but not as creepy from a privacy standpoint versus the audio beacon. So some of the things that could go wrong here is the ACR data is messy. You're going to see phantom spots like television commercials that are getting detected that you haven't run for a long period of time. So there's lots of things that could go wrong here. Also, you need to do some type of a statistical control in many cases. So if you're a large brand, think of the Ubers of the world, the TripAdvisors of the world, the Amazons of the world. You have most of the US population already using and engaged with your site. And so when someone gets detected watching your television ad and then coming to your site, that person could have come to your site even if that ad didn't show. So you need a way of controlling for that to say, well, would this person truly have come to my site if that ad did not show? I'm only interested in knowing what site visits came to my brand caused by my TV ad. In fact, I've done a whole video with the CEO of iSpot about just that one topic. All right, let's switch over now to macro methods. And let's start with my favorite, and I say that sarcastically, the econometric model, otherwise known as the mixed model or mixed marketing model. Goes by different names. Basically, this is a complicated regression model. So think going back to Stats 101, y equals mx plus b. Your x's, your inputs, are usually spends on various marketing channels. So you might have your TV spend as one line item. You may have your SEM spend as another input into the model. And then y, the thing you're trying to predict, is something of value to your business, usually revenue or site traffic or something like that. And the goal of this model is to figure out, well, how much impact is, how much value am I getting per dollar spent on each one of these marketing channels so that I can decide where best to allocate my resources. Out of my 20 years of working in this space, I have not once seen an econometric model that I trusted, that I couldn't poke severe holes into. From an academic standpoint, they in theory should work well. In practice, though, garbage in, garbage out. And unfortunately, garbage is very common within the business setting, particularly when you're talking about large organizations. So here's what ends up happening in practice. So you build a model, and then you quickly realize, well, it's misspecified. I haven't included in one of my marketing channels that's meaningful to my bottom line to drive the result. And so you start adding more and more and more inputs into the model. One of the challenges with an econometric model is the quality of data going in. The quality of these inputs has to be good in order to get a good result. Again, garbage in, garbage out. And unfortunately, in large organizations, when you have 20, 30 parameters in these econometric models, you now have to maintain the quality of each one of those inputs. And think about this in a realistic setting where you have lots of turnover, you have management leadership changing, the teams are changing. Maintaining the quality of data going into these models turns out to be the thing that kills them in 99% of cases. And even in an academic setting, if everything were to work perfectly, my data was perfectly clean, and I was in a clean room environment with one of these models, I still have problems getting these things to work. And the reason for that is usually you're going to still find that they're misspecified. You're usually going to fail the statistical assumptions, particularly when you're dealing with time variables. So the statistical assumptions for these models to be valid oftentimes will fail, but it gets even worse. Even if all those things pass, you then have the problem of multicollinearity, inputs into my model that correlate with each other. Remember where I started with this conversation, where television, what makes it so complicated is that 100% of its value is coming through other channels. So you're guaranteed by design of TV to have multicollinearity. And when that happens within econometric models, there's no way of unwinding. Is it this value? Is it the TV that caused this, or is it the SEM that caused this? Because they're both correlated with each other. We can't tell which one is lurking and which is the cause. And as a result, these models just tend to make consulting firms a lot of money, but in practice, they really don't add all too much value, unfortunately. So let's switch on to time series models. So this is looking at patterns in your site traffic or revenue over time, and then trying to make estimates of what impact television has been having on your data using these models. Usually what I find in practice is we have to combine them with some type of experimental design, either dark periods, so periods that we're not running TV, or pulsing, which is just a bunch of dark periods sequentially ordered. Usually it's 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. And there is good utility in these methods. For one of the things we could get from pulsing is the time delay, the decay effect of TV's impact when we pulse things off. And we can use that in other models here. So sometimes I'll use a time series model as a calibration tool for that lag effect in some of the other models. Think of like the post-spot lift analysis. And we should also see that it corroborates with some of the survey data. So that's where you could start seeing multiple independent sources getting you roughly the same results. So it's pretty cool in practice. It takes a lot of work though. Cross-sectional models. So this is similar to your A/B tests or your split tests if you're familiar with website design or other types of test, experimental design. And the way it works is we have a test group and a control group. The test group is going to get TV, the control group isn't, and then we're going to compare the two. Usually in television world, we do this at a DMA level. DMA is the regions that you can buy TV in locally. The city is usually city-centered. Or in a multinational campaign, we could even do this at the country level. And that's what I've usually done, where I'll have a set of test countries and a set of control countries. The problem with this method is that no two cities are alike, no two countries are alike. You have to do a lot of work to really build out the test and control group in a very methodical way. And even then, it's still not great. That leads me to the next method, time series cross-sectional methods, so TSCS models. This is kind of the best of both worlds. It combines time series with cross-sectional. Let me explain how it works. So it starts off the same as cross-sectional. You have a test group and a control group. Usually it's geographic based. And what we're going to do differently, though, is we're going to follow these two groups over time and see how they vary between one another. So do we see that when the control group goes up, say on site traffic, that the test group goes up? And if it's not to the same extent, is there a multiplier, if you will, that we can put between them? So what you could do is you could build pretty sophisticated models that allow you to predict what's going to happen in the test group just using data from the control group. And you can see kind of where this is going, because then what you could do is you could turn TV on just the test group, and you could use the control to make predictions of what would have happened on the test group had television not run. And then any difference between the actual and that prediction is what you would attribute to television. I like to specifically call out Google Causal Impact and Facebook Profit. So arguably, these are both flavors of Bayesian TSCS models. Google specifically calls out causal impact in one of their white papers for television. And I've used them, and they actually, at least for, I haven't had as much luck with Profit, but causal impact is good. When I'm doing time series cross-sectional, I'll often turn to causal impact. The way it works, it's just time series cross-sectional, so you have the test control, you're following them over time. And what it does is it builds a counterfactual. So again, it's taking that control group, seeing how it changes relative to the test group, and then using that, it makes a prediction on what's going to happen in the test group during the TV period, if the television wasn't running using what it knows from the control group. So that counterfactual is what would have happened in test without TV. You compare it to then what actually happened with TV, and that difference is what gets attributed to television as its impact. So what could go wrong with these methods? They tend to have very short expiration dates in practice. So they generally only work for two weeks to about a month at the scales that I usually work at. And the reason for that, and the way that you kind of validate that, is build these models and try making predictions on test during periods that you're not running TV. And what you're going to find is that the predictions, that counterfactual, is going to diverge from the actual test group, even when I'm not running TV, after about 2 to 4 weeks. It also struggles after you've run television. So say if you run television for a period of time, you then turn it off. You've kind of polluted the environment, if you will, with TV. And so these things work well before you start running a campaign, and for a brief period of time, 2 to 4 weeks, you could get some interesting insights that you can use to calibrate some of the other methods here. But on an ongoing basis, they tend to they fail. They just aren't reliable. And that leads me to the last item here, proxy channel measurements. This isn't so much measuring the TV campaign itself as much as it's measuring the value of whether or not a television asset, a television commercial, is likely to work before we ever put it onto TV. So one of the cool things that you can do is you can use less expensive channels such as YouTube, TikTok, or any number of other places, and test out components of your television campaign, your television spots, including airing spots that you built that you haven't yet run. And at the surface, it's going to look like it doesn't work. And there's plenty of literature out there that shows that, or that discusses how online video consumption works very differently than television. And that is valid. That's true. And at the surface, it's going to look like these two do not even correlate with one another. But what's really cool is that if you do some work and unwind some of this, there are very clear signals you can get by running your television units, your ad units, on YouTube and other platforms, that can be used to predict what's likely to happen with that ad if I were to run it on television. It's not perfect, but it's strongly correlates after you do a bunch of controlling steps. So I hope this video has been helpful. I'm going to go into other videos where I go into more detail about each one of these methods. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Again, I'm Tim Doria, founder of Videoquant.